Hi, this is Larry Gordon, and once again, edition of our regularly scheduled or unscheduled podcasts, which we get around to doing whenever we get a guest to come speak to us that has something of note and importance to say. And despite the circumstances, I'm very happy that our guest is Joel Kaplan, the old friend of mine, many years. It's at least 40 years. It's at least 40 years, and there's something very special about the number 40, as you know, from the years that the Jews dwelled in the desert following the sin against the golden calf, the Chet HaEgel. So there must be something about 40 that brings you, I'm not want to say to maturity, but there's something, I haven't analyzed it deeply or carefully enough, but there's something special about anything that endures for 40 years. Let's put it that way.
Well, we finally reached the promised land.
Yeah. In a sense, you could say that. So, Joel was on the radio with me back in WFMU in the 1970s when we were, I don't even know we were 10 years old yet, but it was a long time ago. And the band that you were managing played at my wedding, which was at the Young Israel Forest Hills. Mm-hmm. On March 4th, 1979. Okay. And he's now today the executive director of Yeshiva Darchei Torah, a couple of miles from where we're sitting now here in Cedarhurst, New York. And also the very popular and talented Chosson cantor at Congregation Beth Shalom. Actually, one of the older shuls older shul.
First Orthodox shul in
the first Orthodox shul in Nassau County. That's quite a distinction, and you are the chazan there, and I've had the opportunity to hear you, and it's a big room, and you managed to fill it with a great voice, booming voice.
Thank you very much. I try to emulate Rabbi Haynes' voice.
Yes. Well, you're the chazan, he's the rabbi, so there's boundaries, right? For everybody. Everybody has their role. Joel is here today, amongst other reasons, because of the sentencing last week, about a year and a half ago. It's a year and a half. Mm-hmm. A year and a half since his daughter, Elisheva, and the young man she was engaged to, Yisroel Levin, lost their lives in a car accident. I don't know, I hesitate to call it an accident, but I guess that's the colloquial term for it, right?
Well, it's interesting because at trial, the defense attorney kept on referring to it as an incident, which when I made my victim's impact statement, mm-hmm. I said that was an outrageous insult to us. If he had called it an accident, no. But to call it an incident, and actually when he responded on behalf of his client, he sort of said, well, that was legalese, and he sort of apologized.
Yeah, because that would trivialize it and diminish what actually took place, because accident is also very, kind, I think, to the perpetrators. I want to talk about your victim impact statement, but circumstances, I mean, what can I say? It's one of those things where I think people in this community and far beyond it's one of those few situations in life where you can recall exactly not just what you were wearing or what you had that morning for breakfast, where exactly you were. So it was shocking, devastating. I just want to say, by way of introduction, that we're discussing before we went on about my daughter's loss of her husband 8 months ago. And when you go through something like that, obviously the circumstances are different. Obviously, some of the results are, a little bit similar. But people tend to say the same thing over and over again, like there's no words, and that began to strike me, repeatedly through that period. And, that's a interesting, good sentiment to express, but that won't work on a microphone. Right. It can't work. We can't sit here, you and I, and say there are no words and say have a nice day, everybody.
Well, when people were coming to during Shiva and they would say there's no words, and I would say there are words. Chazal gave us the words. It's Hamakom Yenachem Eschem B'Sach Sha'ar Volei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. Those are the words, and then the Aval would say Amen. Anything else is what person wants to add because they A lot of people added a lot, but that's the sentence that encapsulates what people, the sentiment that people I know want to convey to us.
I haven't concluded, but I think sometimes that people who have to experience and endure these types of things are selected in some fashion. My mother used to say that, it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. But I don't know. I'm not looking for this kind of distinction. I never was, and I'm sure you weren't either.
You can't choose.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But it's as Orthodox Jews and two people that were brought up in the yeshiva system and have a commitment and a faith, a deep and abiding faith, something that you grapple with still. I'm sure, and it's difficult.
I think what was true from the very moment that it happened, when we came back from the Palisades, because we the last thing we heard was that they were coming back from Muncie. They were visiting Yisroel's grandparents.
So the two of them were engaged.
They were engaged,
and there was Chol Hamoed Pesach.
Right.
And they and it was what, 2018?
It was 2018. April 4th, 2018.
So they were coming back from wherever they were, from Muncie, visiting family.
Yeah. And there's one thing people I think don't realize is that the Levins and the Kaplans have been together for 35 years. I worked together with Shaya, and we went to the same bungalow colony, and you bond like crazy in the bungalow. And as bizarre as almost as it sounds, Yisroel had his eye out for Elisheva from way back, but no dating, nothing inappropriate, but there was something ruchnius, I have to say, and it sounds, people saying, yeah, sure, but that's what it was.
Spiritual connection.
And he made sure that he he became a ben bias by my married children. In fact, before he went out on one of the dates, he went to Mosey Kaplan, my son's house, around the corner, and that's where he changed and got ready for the date, etc. So when they both, we were rooting for him, frankly, because he started to go out Purim when he came back, but we knew that it was coming, and we didn't know if Elisheva would say, "Okay, I also want to marry you." But after the first or second date, it was pretty clear. I mean, the first date they said it was pretty funny because usually on a first date, you talk about each other's families, you learn about each other's families. There was nothing new to learn because
they knew everything.
They knew everything about each other's families. So that what happened was when we came in and we lost both of them, it wasn't just a Chosson who had just become engaged after a couple of dates. It was somebody that we regarded as a son. So that made it extra hard. But our family life is divided between before April 4th, 2018,
of course,
and after April 4th, 2018.
So that night she didn't come home.
That night she didn't. Right. So that
you weren't sure what was going on.
Exactly. That morning I went to shul, came back, and I asked my wife, where everybody is. So she said, "Well, I didn't see Elisheva this morning. She was." She worked nearby, so we said, okay, she must have gotten a ride. Yisroel must have driven her to work. He was supposed to stay over by a friend, and we called the work. It went straight to a voicemail. You get a little pit in your stomach, but you say, we'll call a cell phone. Also went straight to voicemail. We knew that there was an accident, a horrific accident, on 878, and then I called Baruch Bender and said, was there what happened with that accident? He said Hatzalah didn't take anybody to the hospital. So that turned out to be prophetic that they didn't take anybody to the hospital because there was nobody to take to the hospital. So, but we didn't know that yet. And then we didn't know what to do exactly. I told Baruch Ber my daughter and a Chosson were missing, and then his friends started calling because they were supposed to go to Six Flags that day, and they couldn't reach him. And I said, "What was the last time you spoke to him?" He said he texted last night, at 1:30, we're coming back from Muncie, going onto the Palisades, and it's foggy.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife and I thought, you know what? They got it. We're off the road somewhere. They're in a ditch. They were in a hospital. Who knows what it was?
Mm-hmm.
We weren't doing anything at home. We went to the Palisades, and we wanted to see if we could spot them. To make a long story short, their Easy Pass, we found out, pinged on the Whitestone Bridge, which meant they weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
They were this way. And then his cell phone pinged in Inwood, near the accident. By that time, Baruch Bear had figured it out. He was actually, I didn't know this then, he and his family were away for a few days in a well-deserved Chol Hamoed vacation in the Poconos. He came back with lights and sirens all the way back, because he knew he had to sort of get involved. And he, to this day, we're forever grateful to him.
Deal with the families.
Right. And then he was calling the commissioner of Nassau Police Commissioner to see if they could identify the bodies. And I called him again as we were coming back from the Palisades. I said, Baruch Bear, do you have any idea about that accident? And he says, well, I said, how long will it take for you to get back? I said, I suppose about an hour. So he says, I called the commissioner, and he says he'll be able to get back to me in about an hour. And I knew then.
Yeah.
So when we came back, Rabbi Brown and Rebbetzin Brown and Zev Brown were there, and no one said anything. My kids said, we looked at each other and we said, confirmed? Or Brown shook his head. We said, both of them? Yes. And I said, Hashem Nasan, Hashem Lokach, Hishem Hashem Mevorach Me'atov Ad Olam.
Very big sacrifice. Very big sacrifice. We did an interview on another subject last week. We were talking about like Akedas Yitzchak, for example, and Avram Avinu got credit for sacrificing Yitzchak, except for one thing: he didn't really sacrifice him.
Right.
But he got good credit for the intent.
Right.
And we're being, this generation, in this, what people are ready to, wash their hands with as a washed up, no good generation, we're being taken to an extent that, some of the great luminaries and personalities of previous generations, of course, they were asked to sacrifice a great deal, but in this particular instance, in this really, high level type of situation, which is recorded very prominently in the Torah, up to a point, So there's something special about this generation. And I was talking to the rabbi that was our guest on the show, Rabbi Aryeh Zev Ginsburg, and we were discussing the fact that we may not be as shoddy as everyone makes us out to be in this day and age, considering what many of our friends and relatives in some cases have had to endure. It's a year and a half later. Like everything else in life, there's the aspect of something that occurs, like you just described. And then there's, what can I say, the more mundane, everyday, routine aspects to it. There were people responsible for causing that accident. And the what-ifs can drive you insane, of course. But last week was the sentencing. You worked with Nassau County authorities and officials.
Right.
What was that experience like?
They were fantastic. From day one. When the Nassau DA called me when we were sitting Shiva, she said, we're going to take this case and we're going to pursue it. The Nassau County executive then came and paid a condolence call. And again, anything we could do, and they did. And they spent a tremendous amount of resources in the reconstruction of the case, of the accident. They shut down 878, and they had all kinds of reconstruction where they had cars go at the same speeds based upon all the cameras, and the detectives spent a lot of time through the Rockaways tracing the cars coming from the party in the Far Rockaway till they got to this spot. And then when they went past here, one car was going 80, the other car was going over 100.
Really?
He's the one that that lost control. The crazy thing was that she was going 80 miles an hour. She was drunk and high.
So they were racing each other.
Well, right. We think that's the theory. It almost doesn't matter. But yes, that's what we think.
They knew each other previously.
He said that the male driver said he didn't know the female driver.
So
but
he was the male driver,
but his passenger was friends with her, and they decided they had been a party in Far Rockaway, and then they decided to go to the casino, and she was going 80 miles an hour. And he said she was veering into the other lane. You and I, Larry, and anybody watching would say, "Oh, I'm gonna fall back. I don't want to be anywhere near them." But what he did was, he went around her, next to her, in the lane that he claimed she was going into, and sped up above 80 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. It was a wet roadway. It was at night. He had never been on this roadway, and he lost control, and he went right into us, and that's what that impact killed Elisheva and Yisroel. And you're talking about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it to happen. There are so many what ifs, as you said, and one of the big what ifs are when he left Muncie, he went to Shiner's shul to daven, and he missed Baruch Hu for that minyan. Now, Larry, you and I, if we miss Baruch Hu, but we're there for the bulk of the davening Ma'ariv, we would daven, wait for that Baruch Hu at the end,
right,
and be on our way because we have to go back to Far Rockaway and my collar's in the car. No, he waited for the next minyan, and again, if he hadn't, then we would have missed our friends.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrated this, so that's what happened, and we were all makabel that from the get-go. What we're struggling with is the coping that we miss them. That's what it is.
Right. I mean, there's the idea of the timing really could drive everybody crazy. The what ifs, like I said a moment ago. But we have to resign ourselves, I believe. Yes. I'm talking to myself now too. We have to resign ourselves to the fact that we were constructed by design, by our Creator, intellectually, to have a certain limit on where we can go intellectually. Our brain power is limited by design. There's certain things that we have to. I think the test might be that we have to go up ad kan, up to a point, and say, my brain power doesn't go past that, so I have to defer to a greater authority. Right. Like the Kosker Rebbe said, I don't want to believe in a God that I understand.
Right.
So it's an amazing test that we prefer, obviously, not to be put to, but everyone has their own types of challenges and things that they deal with. Some things that happen to people externally, and some people that we imagine that they create themselves, but it's complex, and I think the adage of being beyond our pay grade might be applicable in this situation. Right. So take us into the courtroom and the sentencing, and about what you said and the reaction of the defendants.
Well, our point was to describe two things. One is to describe the behavior again, not that anyone needed to have it described again, but to drive home the fact that this was not just reckless behavior, which is a crime. We think a crime means that you say, I'm going to take this gun out and shoot. Now, reckless behavior, which could lead to these kind of consequences, is also a crime. And that was a crime that he was convicted of. And she pled guilty to.
Reckless homicide, manslaughter.
Well, it was.
What they categorize it?
In other words, it was a criminally negligent homicide, assault. He was charged with manslaughter. And the only reason he wasn't convicted of manslaughter is because the jury system works like this, that there are 12 jurors. They all have to unanimously agree on a verdict. And 2 jurors wanted to show, quote, leniency, and therefore they would not agree to the manslaughter conviction.
So what did they agree to?
They agreed to assaults and criminal negligent homicide. Those are all he was convicted of. 6 out of 8.
Manslaughter is a higher level.
Is a higher level.
Negligent homicide.
But the way also the quirk in the law is that it's hard to understand. But he's a 3-time repeat felony violent offender. This is his 3rd strike, as they say. Mm-hmm. And therefore, because he was convicted of assault, even though he wasn't convicted of manslaughter, and if for some crazy reason he would have been convicted of manslaughter and not assault, the quirk in the law would not have made him a repeat felony offender. So they tried, they thought they were being lenient to him, these 2 jurors, but instead, by convicted of assault, it meant that it was three times that he had been convicted, and therefore there was a mandatory sentence of at least 12 years to life, and the judge saw fit to increase the 12 to 18 as a minimum.
So he was sentenced to 18 years to life.
Right.
The person in the car with him was not
right. She was actually injured. She was not
right. And the person in the other car,
right.
I think I read, was sentenced to 3 to 9 years.
3 to 9. She pled guilty. Correct.
So, I mean, we talked about the fact, obviously, that you miss your kids. Your wife does. Your siblings do. The family does. The community does. How to what extent is some of that pain assuaged by the legal process? Does it take you anywhere?
People say, well, now you have closure. We don't have closure only on the fact that 2 people who should not be on the street,
right,
are not going to be on the street for a long time. Mm-hmm. Even though 18 years is more than the minimum mandatory, it's not 25 years, which is the maximum he could have been. But the truth of the matter is, most experts say that 18 years is not really going to be 18. It'll be longer, because 18, when he comes up for parole after 18.
That's the first time?
That's the first time.
18?
That's correct.
And he is what? How old is he?
He's 37, right? So when he comes up for parole, the parole board will not generally say, okay, your first opportunity, we're going to release you, number 1. Number 2 is his 2 previous stints in jail, he had a total of 12 disciplinary incidents with other inmates, with correction staff. So if you're not a model prisoner, you're also not going to get out after the minimum amount. Mm-hmm. So that's why it will be longer than that. And the truth of the matter is, if he changes himself, and he becomes a law-abiding citizen, then he should be out.
Get an education in jail, I guess, but in terms of, what did it mean to you and your family?
It meant that
other than the fact that obviously they're off the street and can't hurt anybody else as long as they're locked up, so to speak.
That's all it meant. That's all it meant, because the nechama for us is not that people are being, quote, punished. That's not up to us. The nechama to us, to the limited extent, is that these 2 people are off the street and can't cause any more damage. The things that were happening since Elisheva and Yisroel were killed, and I say killed, by the way, I don't say they died because they is that a lot of good has come out of it. It's crazy to say. A lot of chesed has come out of it. There are families that came to us and said they were fighting. There were internal feuds within the families. And they came to us and said, after they saw what happened, that today people are here, tomorrow people are not here, they settled their differences in 2 separate families. That for us meant a great deal. There were 2 chesed organizations that were formed. One of them we formed Simchas Elisheva, which helps collars for their own personal wedding expenses, and the community was unbelievably generous. We've held 100 collars now.
Doing what is that done?
So what we do is we it's $1,000, $500 towards a shaitel, and the shaitel machas that participate discount also. So it's worth probably about $750, and then towards Sheva Brachas outfits of the collars, it's $500, and the 3 stores here participate and also give discounts. So you have collars who come from families who are not necessarily poor, but as everyone knows,
weddings are
expensive. Even if you're trying to cut down, and that you're able to make all your expenses and your operating expenses during the. But when you have this, and chasana hits, so that's you're happy, but the money is an issue. And here, this way, a collar could feel like a queen. That's what it is. We want a collar to feel like a queen, at least in that period of time. And my mechutin, Yisroel Levin, started 10K Batei Yisrael, which is for 10,000 shidduchim. And that's what he said at the Levaya, which was unbelievable. And I think it went viral, where he had the vart that it was Pesach, that you have afikomen, and that your father wants to return the afikomen because he wants to use it for the afikomen because the kids stole it. So when he says, I want the afikomen back, he says, did you make sure that it was pure, that it was pristine, that nothing happened to it? Then I'll take it back. And then you could ask me for something, for giving it back in the same condition that you took it. And he said it's the same thing for us. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us Elisheva and Yisroel. We took care of them. We sent them to the best yeshivas. They had the most wonderful upbringing and friends. And now you want them back? Okay, but returning them the same way you gave them to us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we want to ask for something in return.
So how's that project going so far?
Yeah, we have Baruch
I get his
Hashem.
updates. I get his email updates occasionally.
Right, and you've been also quite generous when we had need for advertising.
Well, listen,
you
have to have priorities in life. There are more important things, and then there are important things, and there are less important things. But obviously, these are vital things. They say that before a beautiful tree can grow, the seed has to be planted, has to be crushed and placed in the ground before it could sprout. The most magnificent, blooming tree or any type of vegetation has to go through that process of what looks like destruction and termination to an extent. But that is I think we were referring to it earlier. Those are the things that we get a small hint, an indication.
Exactly, we get a snapshot
of the possibilities, but you have to also, I think, acknowledge the fact that you were, chosen for a special role, and you have the obligation, I guess, without any choice of yours, to rise to the occasion, and turn what happens to you, as difficult as it is to navigate and to endure, and rise up and make it into something that improves creates a better condition in the world, especially our community, which is a worldwide community. Whatever we do here could affect people, all over the world. But I want to thank you very much for joining with us today, Joel Kaplan.
Thank you.
Father of Elisheva Kaplan and father-in-law of Yisroel Levin. Also, I know the family going back many years. And you made an extraordinary sacrifice, involuntarily, I would say, but working on it now with all the vim and vigor and all your koiches and kavanas. Joel's the executive director of Yeshiva Darchei Torah, not too far from here in Far Rockaway, Chosson at Congregation Beth Shalom, and a friend of many, many years and decades. And I thank you for joining us, and we look forward to good things and good news and happy times.
On both ends. Thank you.